way. That's what good teams do. Meanwhile, I think everyone is just anxiously awaiting what they're going to see from LSU against Vanderbilt coming up this weekend, because we saw what happened with LSU last weekend. It was not pretty. But in case you weren't noticing, Vanderbilt played at College Station and played A&M off their feet. Had a real shot to win that game. Fell short 17-12, but they held a top 25 team to 17 points and had a shot against them. So even though LSU went to Nashville and won easily last year, you can't expect that to be necessarily the case this year, given what both teams look like the first week. Joining us to talk about that, among other things, our good and great friend from WAFB in Baton Rouge, Jacques Doucet. Jacques, it's always a pleasure. Welcome. I hope you're well.
Kenny, I'm doing great. How about this weather, huh? Just amazing.
Fantastic. I mean, this is like dry air, great breathable air. Feels like football. It's great. Let's hope it stays this way. So considering the way 2020's gone, I wouldn't expect it to, but I sure hope that's the case. So, it's like 2020. It's like I've said before, it's going to register in Webster's or in a Merriam dictionary as a definition of 2020 will be vulgarity. So that's all I'm saying. So, but you're right. Great weather and looking forward to football ahead. So we'll dive right into it. I mean, there's so many places you can go, and everybody's broken down what happened last Saturday. Wasn't a pretty picture at all, and it caught me off guard, I must say, and I said that. At the same time, maybe it shouldn't have, given the enormity of the number of players that LSU lost and the fact that Glenn Logan didn't play, and the fact, most notably, that Derek Stingley didn't play. The opt-out certainly didn't help. Gary Vincent could have helped, and, of course, Jamar Chase would have helped just light years. So all that considered, we'll start there. I guess this should not have been such an unexpected development, right?
No, I think you're right. Certainly when I was down outside the stadium before the game, I watched the team march into the stadium, and they did a very miniature version of the Tiger Walk. Only a few people were out there to see them, and that was very strange. The whole campus was strange. No traffic, no tailgating, obviously, no atmosphere to speak of. And when the team marched into the stadium, I was just thinking to myself, it seemed like there were a lot less of them than there were the season before. And the year before, I could point to almost every player walking in and tell you his name, and just there were so many star players. In this case, that wasn't the case. I mean, you could point to a few, and a friend of mine said she called it an LSU JV team, which at first I felt was a little insulting, but then I thought about it. I'm like, you're kind of right. I mean, the people that LSU is counting on right now, for the most part, outside of guys like Jacoby Stevens and Terrence Marshall and some others, really played sparingly for LSU last year. They were not counted on in big situations. They've got some young talent they're trying to work in. I think Elias Ricks is a great example. He gets burned on a touchdown in the first half as he leaps with one hand trying to knock it down. And then in the second half, he picks off a pass. But I think this lined up perfectly for Mike Leach and Mississippi State. Tiger Stadium was totally neutralized in terms of atmosphere. B, if you ask Mike Leach to take one player off the LSU defense, you got to pick up one. Who would he pick? Certainly, you would pick Derek Stingley. And so, you're right. The off-season numbers, LSU hoisted that trophy in the Superdome. We knew a lot of those guys were not coming back. But then, as the summer months rolled on, Marcel Brooks, there's another guy that I thought was going to be on this team this year. He transfers to TCU in the offseason. You're right, Kerry Vincent, that was a big loss. And so you got guys out there, this young man, Darren Evans, I thought, what a great story. He's from Baton Rouge. He went to Glen Oaks. He was at Nicholls State. And about a month ago now, he's got a chance to play for the LSU Tigers in his hometown. Well, he got kind of left flat-footed a couple times, and it looked like he was a little out of his element out there. So certainly did not expect Mississippi State to pass for over 600 yards in the game. And Bo Pelini, his return to LSU, very poor start on the second go-around. I was in Tempe, Arizona for his first game as a defensive coordinator. I think the quarterback was Sam Keller at Arizona State, just lit LSU up that night. It was a bad bad debut that night that LSU found a way to win. Jamarcus Russell to early Doucet. Obviously, in this case, they could not find a way to win, and really Mississippi State sprinted away from LSU at the end to win it pretty convincingly.
No doubt. I mean, if you look at the way the game unfolded outside of the turnovers, it was a whipping, to say the least. And, of course, it was embarrassing for all the yards, the chunk plays that took place. And I guess with Pelini, look, he's got skins on the wall, but he coached a bad game. Bottom line is you lose your best player before the game starts, and it's a dramatic adjustment. And they didn't make the adjustment, and given that circumstance with the guys you had, unless he overestimated his coverage abilities, there's no way you play man defense and blitz with those lack of cover skills that you had on the field. At some point, you had to rush 3 or 4 and just play coverage and try to make them drive the football. I mean, bottom line is they really didn't have to drive it. They just made big play after big play.
Yeah, Kenny, Mike Leach in his post-game reaction said that he expected LSU to play them looser. He did not expect LSU to play them that tight, and they just went over the top all game long, and also had plenty of, Coach O said Monday, there was 383 of those yards came after the catch. And that was the great thing about Dave Aranda, was it not? How many times did we go to an LSU game, LSU struggling in the first half defensively, second half they shut the guys down, making adjustments. And I think in this case, that's where a lot of the criticism is coming from. Why didn't they make adjustments? Why didn't they go into a zone? Why did they keep playing man-to-man defensively? So I would expect LSU to implement some zone this weekend when they play Vanderbilt and moving forward. But, can't get this one back. It's done.
Yeah, I just think that, and I've said this for many years with regard to coaches, the best coaches are the coaches that fit their personnel, not fitting their personnel to their scheme, but fitting their scheme to their personnel and not putting a square peg in a round hole. And I think that Bo Pelini's a good enough coach to realize, okay, maybe I don't have all that. Even with Stingley, maybe I don't have all that in terms of coverage abilities. I mean, Cardell Flott, when he's a fourth guy, looked pretty good last year, right? Now you ask him to be a top guy, and maybe he's not the same guy. You mentioned Evans, bless his heart. Then you can throw in Ward. You can throw in 14. I mean, there's nobody covered anybody, basically. And the safety play obviously wasn't there either, by and large. So as a result, you get what you get. And you know what kind of offense you're going to get. Even if you hadn't seen this coach at that school before, you knew what he ran and what he was going to do. So, look, it's one game. You make the adjustment. Forget about national championship. That was never going to happen anyway. It's always that even versus the odd year. This is the even year when the schedule sends you to Florida and Auburn. You're not going to win a national championship or be in contention. In the odd year, you will be. That's just been the case with LSU, not to mention how young this team is. And that'll bring us to the quarterback. And just a lot of debate with regard to Miles Brennan. I haven't seen anybody that says they think he's good or thinks they like him that much, but some people defended him and should, because it was his first game and he hadn't had the opportunity, and others are already asking about Max Johnson. So, and the thought process is, all right, he's been there 4 years. There's a reason he hasn't played. On the other hand, you got to give a guy a chance. I kind of think it was a mixed bag for him watching the game, some good moments and some bad moments. What did you see in Brennan?
Yeah, well, you and I are thinking exactly alike. I think that's what I said in my stand-up, mixed bag. Certainly, we've always known he's got a big arm. We've a stronger arm than Joe Burrow. If there's one department where he's got a advantage on Joe Burrow, it's the fact that he can chunk the ball down the field a little bit further, and we saw that the throws he made and some of the deep throws he made, but then even some of those were criticized. The ball hung up a couple times, and the receiver had to wait for it. But, I think that the biggest thing he's being criticized about is, you can get in trouble reading facial expressions, but I guess some people say he doesn't have, sometimes he doesn't have the look of some guy who knows what's going on, too slow with the decision-making, holding the ball too long. Those are some of the criticisms. You look at the stat line, he threw for 345 and 3 touchdowns. The 2 interceptions, I think the first interception, his arm got hit, or he would have thrown a touchdown to raise to the McMath. And then the second one was the last play of the game. He's just throwing it up in the end zone. But And I'm going to try my best not to compare him to Joe Burrow, but when the pocket broke down last year and Joe Burrow started scrambling, good things would happen. Either he would run for a first down or he would throw it to a receiver for a big gain or a first down. Miles Brennan does not look comfortable trying to throw on the run for the most part or make plays with his feet. I don't think that's his game. I think he's a pocket passer who can move a little bit if he has to, but they did not get off to a good start. They punted the football the first 4 times they had it. I think their first 15 plays gained 26 yards. Eric Gilbert dropped the first down early on. Terrence Marshall dropped a slant over the middle that I think he would have scored a touchdown on. And the offensive line wasn't very good. Brennan was sacked 7 times, and the running game wasn't very good. I think they gained 58 yards the first 23 times they ran it, and none of those guys looked all that great. I think LSU's longest run of the game was a 12-yarder. So there are some things around him that didn't help either. So I totally agree with the assessment. On one hand, he's been here 4 years. He should be better. On the other hand, this is the first time he's been a starter, known that when he's run out the tunnel. So we'll see. The old cliche, you make your biggest improvement from week 1 to week 2. We'll see in terms of can you make your biggest improvement from your first start to your second start. We'll see.
Yeah, I think they would have benefited from that cupcake game to start the season. Once the schedule changed and became all SEC, it changed the dynamic. I think it certainly would have helped him to get a game with confidence under his belt. But you're right. He doesn't have the mobility, so he's not going to extend plays like Burrow did. But also there's the whole concept of the feel for the game. Burrow's uncanny, unbelievable feel for the game, unbelievable feel for coverages, for pressures, to make adjustments. That's not what we saw Saturday. And then again, that's really what we shouldn't have expected to see. So I think with regard to Miles Brennan, look, give the guy a chance. Not time to throw in the towel already on that and see what's happening. Because you just brought up the next thing I was going to bring up, which is their offensive line, which to me was probably more disappointing than the play of the quarterback because, as you mentioned, they didn't pass protect well. They didn't block the run all that well, even though they have 4 guys who played some last year, and the other guy is a transfer who played last year. But again, he's coming from Harvard, and the others, what's the old saying? If you weren't starting, there's probably a reason you were a backup, right?
Yeah, and certainly it's going to be interesting this week, Kenny, with Darren Rosenthal being questionable at left tackle. Now you got Cameron Wire, who has not made a start in his career, and when you look next to his name, it says scout, which means last year he didn't play enough to letter as a freshman. So that could be very interesting for LSU moving forward this week. I tried my best to kind of look at Liam Shanahan, who you referenced, the Harvard transfer. What a story. How to go from the Ivy League and playing against, Ivy League teams in front of 1,000, 2,000 people to now playing in the SEC. I guess he held up pretty well in the game, but you look at the guys you lost, Kenny. I mean, Lloyd Cushenberry, starter for the Denver Broncos at center. Damian Lewis is starting for the Seattle Seahawks.
Yep.
Sadiq Charles playing for the Washington Redskins. Even some other guys, I think, I haven't kept up, but I think even some other guys signed free agent deals. So you lost a lot of quality guys on that offensive line.
Yep, I thought that was big. In terms of the running backs, again, you can't really evaluate them. They didn't get the ball that much, and they didn't have a whole lot of room to run. I think, it's nice. One of the things we saw under Les Miles is sometimes they played too many running backs. I'm sure you agree with that. Some years, remember, they play 4 guys, and you just can't get a rhythm that way when you're always looking over your shoulder and you're in one series and you're not in the next. So they got 3 guys, and I think 3's a good number. You can play with that, although at some point, you'd like to have that one guy you can ride as a hot hand and get him the ball 15 times and get him that rhythm. I think that's important for a team in terms of its identity. And I'm not sure who that guy is. They all have different skills. We know Curry's got experience as the older guy. Price is a strong dude. Emery's a fast dude. So I'm not sure who that guy is.
No, I think you're right. And I think it's a case of, I know Coach O is making decisions to win games, but you sometimes kind of wonder if you're trying to keep everyone happy and the parents happy too. You know, I mean, in terms of getting everybody involved, like you said, and like you said, does it take a guy 10 carries before he's warming up to finally pop one for 50 yards in the game? I certainly remember that Les Miles' first game, and it was like one running back each series. You know, here came Justin Vincent, here is Joseph Adai, here was whoever, and so yeah, I think. Curry is a great story. I'm rooting for the guy. He's a tremendous worker. He works so hard. I talked to his high school coach and his high school trainer that said that the day the kid signed, most kids when they sign, they want to go party. He wanted to go straight to the weight room. So, at the same time, when I'm wondering that game against Oklahoma last year, he played very well. But then, you're the product of Joe Burrow throwing 7 touchdowns in the first half, and there's some room to run. So now we got some different circumstances. Tyron Davis-Price, powerful runner, great kid. And then, some people think John Emery is the best of the three. Why isn't he starting? Is he still, maturing and learning? I'm not sure. But, that'll be interesting to see going forward, those three guys.
Yeah, I think that, and again, there's no way you can make a determination, but in terms of the ability to make a play or make a big play, Emery's probably the guy that has the most ability, but it's clear they didn't trust him in passing downs and pass protection last year. So we'll see. Maybe that's part of it this year, but I do think that you'd like to ride a hot hand if you can discover one there. Receivers, you talked about McMath a little bit. Marshall caught pass, but he dropped 2 passes in that game too. And there's got to be more consistency there. The loss of Chase was massive. Aside from how good he was, it's the domino effect and how good he makes the other guys around him. My guess is they're gonna try to incorporate and count more on those 2 young kids, Boutte and Moore, in all likelihood, as this season progresses. Agreed?
Yeah, Kenny, I agree. I think the surprise of the game was Jure Jenkins.
Right.
Certainly, when Coach Hill was talking about receivers, and we were all talking about wide receivers in the preseason, it was Terrence Marshall, it was Keyshawn Boutte, it was Racey McMath, Trey Palmer, the kid from Kentwood, who I think's got a bright career. I'm rooting for John Trey Kirkland. He caught one ball this past game. He's been there a long time. I think he's a good kid. I'd like to see him get some plays if he can. But Jenkins was not really a guy we talked about. He caught 5 passes all of last year, and they were all in the Northwestern State game. 65 to 14 games, LSU in garbage time. He caught 5 passes in this game this past weekend, including a 47-yarder. So that surprised me. But yeah, Boutte certainly is the big recruit they're looking at. Marshall, suddenly goes from the 3rd receiver last year behind Jamar Chase and Jefferson to the number 1 guy. So I guess he's going to be making those adjustments and going up against the opposing team's number 1 corner and getting used to all that. Certainly, Terrence Marshall is going to be a pro. There's no doubt about that. But he did drop a couple, and so we'll see. It looked like they played 7 or 8 wide receivers in the game, and Eric Gilbert, they call him a tight end, but he's basically an extension of the wide receivers as well. So a lot of weapons out there.
Yeah, he talked about Coy Moore quite a bit too, and then he had an injury slowed him down, and of course he did play a little bit in the game, caught 1 short pass, but so another guy. So yeah, they'll sort that out, and again settle on that 3 or 4 rotation situation. Everybody commenting on the defense and Pelini, and yet we haven't heard a ton about Linehan and the offensive side of the ball. And I said it in the offseason. People were trying to minimize the departure of the coaches. And I said, look, the people that criticized Aranda, I wonder how they're feeling now about him playing coverage rather than going after the quarterback as much as we saw this past weekend. And then, of course, with Joe Brady, we knew that was going to be a loss. Linehan's an NFL guy with experience, but Brady was superb. I don't think we can underestimate how important he was to this offense, and yet he had all the tools to work with. It was a perfect storm.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are going to be watching that. I mean, Steve Ensminger was the offensive coordinator in 2018. He was the offensive coordinator last year, and there was a big difference in those 2 years. And the big difference was Joe Brady was an assistant 1 year, and he wasn't the year before. Now, I think people will look at these offensive numbers when the year's over with. But certainly in 2018, LSU struggled in the red zone, and we heard a lot about Scott Linehan and what he was going to bring to the red zone in terms of packages and this and that. 2018 Coach Tracy's kicking all these chip shot field goals instead of touchdowns. And the Aranda thing is interesting. I think I've spoken to people, who I trust who say that Coach O and Aranda at some point last year, maybe in the latter points of the year, decided that it was best for them to have an amicable break. I think that Coach O wanted a defensive coach who was like him in terms of personality, bombastic, a yeller, one who's emotional while coaching the guys, and that's just not Dave Aranda. Dave Aranda's a cerebral coach. He doesn't shout and yell at people. He would have not fit into the presidential debate last night, Kenny. He would have not done well there. So
no, he would not have fared well.
Yeah, so there you go. I think you're exactly right. I think assistant coaches are very, very important, and sometimes understated. And certainly last year was a perfect storm with the coaches and the players.
Yeah, look, I like Coach O, and I'm very happy he's done as well as he's done. And yet, when he made that statement, what was it, 2 weeks ago, that this defense is better at any time than it was last year, I'm like, what is he talking about? And that was clearly, some people perceived it as being a shot at Aranda. Maybe it was.
Well, he has made some comments, Kenny. I mean, he was doing a Rotary Club Zoom, and these were people at the Rotary Club just asking questions, and somebody said, "Well, Coach, what do you need to improve upon most from last year?" And he said, "Defense. I don't think we were very good on defense last year." And certainly there were some games where it was back and forth. I mean, I don't think he was happy at Alabama when they gave up a 75-yarder on one play late in the game. I know he wasn't happy the way Kyle Trask in Florida marched the ball up and down the field, although in the second half the adjustments were made. And certainly Ole Miss, when John Rice Plumlee, it was like he was running track all day. It was 60-yard sprints into the end zone. But then after that, to look the way they closed it, Texas A&M, Georgia, Oklahoma, and then Clemson. I mean, the way college football is played these days and the points that are being scored, the way LSU played defense down the stretch last year, against the opposition they went up against. Can't complain about that, I don't think. So, yeah, I was taken back by that. Jacoby Stevens said the same thing. We're light years ahead of what we were last year. And look, preseason talk is all positive, and it's all propaganda for the most part. Nobody's going to go out and say, man, we suck. But at the same point, to overstate it that much was, raise some eyebrows for sure.
Well, I mean, again, much like you talked about the offense, all you need to do is look at the next level. Rashard Lawrence, of course, Christian Fulton's already playing and playing well for Tennessee. Grant Delpit got hurt, unfortunately, but we know what he meant to that team. Patrick Queen starting for a Super Bowl contender in the Ravens and playing pretty well there. I mean, you're talking about some dudes, and then Shelvin opts out. So that's some significant talent that's hard to replace. And I didn't mention everybody, but I mentioned most of them. That's a bunch of guys. That's why whether they like the scheme they have and they think that they're doing something better than they did it last year, there's no way with the talent that you have compared to last year that you can say that you're better than last year. I just don't. I didn't see that at the time, and I certainly don't see it now.
Yeah, certainly on Twitter there were a few guys who did the two big eyes emoji, the big eyes emoji when they saw that quote. I think Braden Fehoko was another one who's on the practice squad right now with the Chargers. And,
yes, correct.
You got Jacob Phillips, who's with the Cleveland Browns, who was a high draft pick. I mean, there's a lot of guys, like you said, and so this weekend, Kenny, I mean, you're going up against a true freshman quarterback in an empty stadium against a program that's the worst program in the SEC. So if you have defensive struggles this weekend, that's going to be a bad sign. So hopefully they can get out there this weekend and look a lot better, and then look better against Missouri as well, and then when they go to the Swamp to play Florida, that's going to be a big time challenge for them. And at that point, I don't know how many fans are going to be let in, and all that stuff moving forward here. It's just I think this whole football season, Kenny's going to have a big asterisk next to it. And I'm not saying that just because LSU lost their first game. It's just going to be such a funky year all across the board that. The national champion, I'm sure they'll be happy, whoever wins the national champion this year, but at the same point at time, it will not be the story of the year, that's for sure.
Just to maybe 2 minutes left with Jacques Doucet. I wanted to ask you about prep football since we're getting started this week finally, although we had 2 schools that have canceled games already because of COVID-19, which I reported earlier today. Belle Chase having to cancel its first 2 games because of 1 positive test, and Lakeside up in northwest Louisiana having to do that for the first week too. And yet we are going to play. And with regard to the Baton Rouge area, I would say, and I'll ask you to give me your 2 cents, but the usual suspects. I rank Catholic of Baton Rouge number 1 in 5A going into the season. Zachary obviously is quite good again. I'm sure that they're going to be that type of team. Just talk about a few of the teams in the Baton Rouge area that you see being definitive threats this year statewide.
Well, there certainly appears to be a bit of a power shift in terms of, U-High for several years was the best team in Baton Rouge and won 29 games in a row, whatever, and sent a lot of guys. I think one year they had 5 or 6 guys who were D1 guys going to LSU, Georgia, Clemson. And so from what I can see, Catholic High is loaded. As you mentioned, they had a scrimmage against Walker last week, who is not chopped liver by any stretch, and dominated that scrimmage, totally dominated it. Parkview Baptist, I was at their scrimmage last week. They were a traditional power, won a lot of state championships. I think they're starting to come back a little bit with Stefan LaForce, who was a quarterback at Louisville for Bobby Petrino, and so they're starting to make it back. And Zachary, David Brewerton's just done an amazing job there. I think they won 3 state titles in 5 years, and they're sending their share of players to the next level. And I think I'm trying to remember who they played in scrimmage action. I know we had highlights of it last week, but they certainly had their share of great players as well, and one of the best programs in the area. So I'm just glad, Kenny, that they're getting out and they're playing for real this week. The games will count. The cheerleaders will be there. The bands will be there, and the weather will be perfect. So during the summertime, certainly, I was getting very nervous. All these kids lifting weights, working. I was hoping that they weren't doing it for nothing, and thankfully they weren't.
Follow him on Twitter at Jacques Doucet, and of course, always does a great job at WAFB. Jacques, thanks so much for the time. We really appreciate it, and hopefully we'll be talking about something a little bit better this weekend.
Absolutely. Anytime. Thanks for having me.
Pleasure. Jacques Doucet, WAFB.